address, and we'll now reconvene. Okay. All right. Yes,
I'll just,
Councillor Nicol.
thanks for that, and glad to hear is okay. The last point was just for kata. Small councils like Waitomo and Otorohanga, for example, that they have small teams for their resourcing, and for them to come up with, the public transport planning that then integrates with the rest of the regional stuff, they don't have their own separate role for that necessarily. By doing this, by collecting the rate across the region, we have this ability to employ the staff that then are allowed under Local Government Act to look everywhere in the region for where there are opportunities. So I think regional rating only opens the door for the more rural communities to be able to set these up. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Yes.
I don't see the need to rush through this. I thought we paused the last one, and as far as I'm concerned, we're still on that one. And I wanted to see what the resolution was, because I think we should have in there something about subject to partnership with TAs.
The only concern I have about that, and I'm happy to take some advice, is we do have our regional transport committees that those TAs have membership on. We also have the Future Proof Public Transport Committee that the associated TAs have membership on. I'm just looking for.
Perhaps if I can help, I think in terms of the further work that's required around the application of rating, it could be considered a given that that will be done in partnership with territorial authorities. However, at the end of the day, it is this council's decision around the mechanism by which it would enact regional rating. So a little bit like this, a consultation process, you will have worked with key stakeholders in developing that proposal. You will hear feedback on that. But at the end of the day, the decision on a regional rate and how that may work sits at this table. But
I'm just wondering whether we should have a sub-clause to that last, to note that, so that the TAs notice that as well. It's not being mandated upon them. Yeah. So can we look at what the resolution was?
So we've got in partnership with territorial authorities.
But there's no partnership with option one, because that's something I thought was also included.
No, what I heard around this table was general support for regional rating. It was the mechanism through which we regionally rate that there was not collective buy-in on a way forward, and the direction was to further explore over the next 12 months with something other than the two that were put forward.
And Madam Chair, we're going to do our best to do that. We're the ultimate organisation that has to take on the responsibility for doing this. If we get it wrong, we'll wear it. We can't, how do I put it, try and drag the TAs in with us in terms of trying to share the burden if we get it wrong. It's going to be our decision, but we'll do our absolute level best to get it right, and that makes sense,
Sure.
We've been asking to do this for quite some time for reasons that everyone understands, eh?
Yeah, I just thought we hadn't jumped to the next agenda item yet. We hadn't finished this.
The previous system was all about blaming other people because no one individual council had the ability to make decisions. So it resulted in everyone blaming each other all the time, which was hopeless.
All right, I really do want to move on, but because I have allowed some option to continue, I will continue in that vein. I've got Councillor Cookson and Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand where you're coming from, Stu, but I'm still at the point where I can only support one if you're going to have the service is going to be what the community wants to pay for, and you're going to regionally rate them for it. So they got to have the service that that community wants, not what the region is willing to give them. And you've got to make it clear that in the last, however I know, I've had been involved in politics or whatever in my region, there's always been arguments over bus services. It's not what the community want. So if you're going to regional rate, you have to give them the service they require. No arguments.
I'm at a bit of a loss at this point because actually I thought it was our role to be a regional coordinator and to ensure that collaboration occurs. And I'm wanting to know what the point of the Regional Transport Committee is. If we start writing documents like this, where we're trying to tell them what their job is, I mean, for goodness sake, it's like, and the way I understood the process you outlined, Madam Chair, we're not focusing on writing these motions today. That comes later. What we're interested in is a straw poll to get us the progress we need for the next phase of the development. But honestly, I mean, we have the Regional Transport Committee chair here. We have the membership of every one of the TAs on the committee. What else do we need? For goodness sake, they need to get on and do their job.
Okay, so just in the interest of consistency, I'm going to now do a straw poll on just the regional rating first. So, sorry? I'm just, there seemed to be some ambiguity for people, so I'm going to do it again. So if you are in favor of regional rating for public transport, put your hand up. Okay, so that's that one. Now I'm looking at the specific things we did consult on. And I'm not going to call them option 1 and 2. I'm going to say there was the preferred option, which was the targeted rating within 5 Ks of a bus stop. Is there anyone in favor of that? No. The second one was targeted rate within 800 meters of a bus stop. Is anyone in favor of that? No. Okay. So we know that neither of the options we have previously that we have consulted on here are acceptable. It's go back to the drawing board on it. So just so we're all clear. Okay. Now we'll move on to Huia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Huia was not a consultation topic specifically within the long-term plan, as it had been in the 2021-31 document. We did receive a number of feedback comments from 65 submitters as part of the long-term plan consultation, and the feedback is included within your report. Perhaps more prominently, the report focuses on the feedback or the decisions that the NZTA board made at their meeting on the 16th of May around what they would be prepared to fund from a Crown perspective for the service through to the end of the trial. And as you can see from the board, that's a 70% reduction from 75.5 this year, 70% into next year, and then 60% through to the end of the trial in April 2026 or to no later than June 2026. The report looks at what the options could be for council in the context of those decisions on the basis of what was consulted upon, and includes some legal advice that we have received, which looked at what the statements were across the consultation document and the long-term plan related to a reduction from 75.5 to 51. and what the consequence of the agency's decision is in continuing to provide us with an enhanced FAR of 70% and 60%. The report looked at what the potential options could be to fund the difference between those numbers through to the end of the trial, and recommends that the Te Huia reserve be allocated to make that difference up through to April or June 2026. Now, the Te Huia reserve has accumulated since prior to the launch of the service, in that there was budget put within the 2018 to 2028 long-term plan for Te Huia to launch in 2020, and it eventually launched in April 2021. It then stopped from August 2021 through till the end of January 2022, and that sum was added to the reserve. And then there has been budget included in this financial year and a little bit in last financial year to fund uplifts in service that have previously been approved through annual plan process, which were not able to occur because Kiwi Rail were not able to provide us with enough trained locomotive engineers. So the services that launched in February this year are the beginning of that service uplift, but the dollars based on a start date earlier than that were added to that reserve. So the reserve sum, as per Q3 forecast that went through Finance and Services Committee last week, is around 2.2 million for the Te Huia reserve at the end of this financial year. And the report recommends the use of those dollars to make up this funding difference through to the end of the trial. So the recommendation, we believe, is aligned with the wording in the LTP, which is that there's no additional burden on ratepayers. But for your discussion, happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Smith.
Madam Chair, could I just like to not challenge, but understand, this is the document, we're all familiar with it, went out for the consultation, and on page 22 it says what we're proposing. On the next page it says other work we're prioritising. And then a couple of pages over on page 27, without any other headings, we've got Te Huia rail service. You say, or you said, we're not consulting. However, I believe the inference is that when you include the likes of, for Pete's sake, regional spatial planning, Wharekauā Coast, wetlands, that was all comments have come back through the submissions on that, and therefore, by default, we've actually not necessarily consulted, but sought feedback. And so, to me, it's one and the same. Can I just have clarity on that, please?
Yeah, well, to qualify my statement, we consult on everything in our long-term plan as part of the long-term plan consultation. It wasn't one of the named topics.
And through the chair, there's information that's provided on it. There is no question that's asked on it. So consultation normally is we provide options for feedback. Certainly information on what was assumed, both short-term and long-term, has been pulled out.
It's been pedantic over words, but the reality is we consulted on it because we included it under the section what we're proposing. So I just don't want to water down. I don't want to see the feedback on Te Huia watered down because it wasn't consultation. It was included in our consultation.
Through the chair, I don't think we've watered that down at all by calling it out as a separate topic for discussion.
Just wanted to understand. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments about what has been proposed here in response to the announcement from NZTA? Councillor Dunbar-Smith, and then
Yeah,
I'll come to you.
I have a question first before a comment. And so it was in the CEO's submission, shift of Te Huia renewal costs into years 1 to 3. Now, what exactly does that mean?
So the options that were presented to you as part of the business case work, there was a business case on service enhancements for Te Huia, and you will recall that that didn't propose any service enhancements until year 4 of the plan, so until the trial had ended. When those dollars were pushed out, we incorrectly also moved out some maintenance and renewal money and a small amount of capital that was required to continue to run the service. So the CEO submission recommended that being moved back into years 1, 2, and 3. So the dollars go up in earlier years and go down in later years as a result of that.
And how much was that maintenance?
It's in the CEO submission report later on in the agenda. Let me find it.
It's fine. While you're looking for it, the second one is the capital investment in European train control system. Seems to be 1.5 million in the following year. Now, if we don't go ahead with the, if we go ahead with the current proposal you've got here, then we would be funding that. Whereas if the train service is not going to continue, then that's quite a significant capital outlay.
This has been the challenge with Te Huia all the way through. We're being asked to make decisions ahead of having clarity about direction. We've pushed those dollars into that year because we want, or we need this system to be in place prior to the opening of the City Rail Link. So obviously at the point that the trial is confirmed or not, there would need to be a rebalancing of all of those future projects. Let me just find that page, sorry. So that work is programmed that year because the City Rail Link is due to open in the 2026-2027 year, which is effectively at the end of the trial. So we need to have done that work ahead of that point.
Right. So I just in comment, I don't agree with Noel. I don't think we have consulted on this properly. Normally there is an option and you get feedback. The people who feedback were only the ones who were supporting Te Huia. Whereas what we've actually stated in here is it wouldn't be affordable if it was 51%. So a lot of people assumed, given a sub-government decision being made, that there was no point in making comments. So I noticed that on something, the Motoraka water take, we've actually consulted quite extensively, and yet on something as major as Te Huia, we have not given people a chance to have a say, and I think they deserve to have a say in the annual plan.
So through the chair, can I maybe refer to the information that's on the slide and the intent of the report? So in essence, what staff have looked at is the ability to address the decline in NZTA funding for the period of the trial, alongside the evaluation of the trial service, and before there's any consideration of the service becoming permanent and at a standard funding assistance rate. It is the intent that we would go and ask exactly those questions of the community around the affordability and willingness to pay, with rates being one of the mechanisms to top up the decline in NZTA funding. But also, I think, Phil, noting that there's work happening around fare revenue as well. So in terms of that user pays mix.
Yes, but I'm saying that we're going out to consultation on the PT issues at the annual plan, and there's no reason why we shouldn't also consult at the 25-26 annual plan for Te Huia about whether people want the 60% to be used.
Want the 60%.
When it drops from 70, it's with 300, instead of 300,000, we're using 1.6 million or whatever it is of rating subsidy in the
but
second year.
No, they're not. It's not rating subsidy. It's
Reserves.
Those are reserves
reserves.
they were targeted rates that were already collected
Mm.
for Te Huia.
Mm.
So
Right.
the utilization of those.
There is, but that money could also be given back to ratepayers in a rates reduction. If we decided not, if they voted in at the consultation not to proceed beyond this current year, then the 1.7 million could be allocated back to rating reduction. And I think the public should have a chance to have a say on that.
Councillor Graff.
Well, just following on there. Yes, that just that reserve fund there, 2.2. If that wasn't used, what's the alternatives? Yeah. And that's, so what I'm getting at is, yeah, if it wasn't, so it's going to be used, is that where we're at? It's got to be used for the Te Huia?
Those rates that are in that reserve have to be used in relation to the Te Huia, because that was what they were collected for originally.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hughes.
Madam Chair. I also support what Councillor Dunbar Smith is saying regarding consultation in the 25-26 long-term plan. I think something which is critical to ratepayers. It's a big number and we're masking it at the moment. I understand the reasons why we're doing that, because we don't have a mandate to increase rates to cover the shortfall at the present time, and there is reserve there to cover it. My question is to Phil, I guess. There's going to be a fair increase. What I'd like to see is some sensitivity analysis around the impact on patronage when that happens, and what would happen if you moved the actual charge for ratepayers using the service to the level which is going to be self-sustaining at a 51% contribution from WTA, with the balance being coming from rates from the patronage. So that top up between the 51% and the 75%, which was originally consulted on, needs to be tested in terms of the sensitivity analysis patronage, so that we move to a user pays principle. I'm not saying 100%, but certainly a long way towards that.
So there are several good questions in there. I'll try to answer all of them. The independent performances, or the 2-year review document identified an action and a commitment to undertake an independent review of fares and costs and patronage. And that work is underway, and it's due to be presented to the August Future Proof PT subcommittee. That report has already looked at what are the ways that we can get more passengers on the train, reduce the cost of operating the train, and then improve our revenue through fares. And as part of that, it's taken the change from $18 to $21.60, which is the impact of the July 1 rates increase, and indicated that on its own would increase the fare recovery to around 20%. But then it will undertake some modelling of changes to the fee structure for Super Gold Card users and potentially children at that number, and also at a much higher number, understanding the elasticity of demand to cost. So and that model is being run right now to give us a sense of what that would do. And in each case, we're modelling year 2 of that change as opposed to year 1, so we get a sense of what the level of recovery might be if people have a short-term shock but then do return. So I'm really hopeful that come early August we'll be able to present a report that sets all of those options out. The report also looks at where does the train stop now, and compared to Huia through to the Capital Connection, which gets a third of its passengers at Levin and Otaki, and then another third of its passengers within the Wellington region at Paraparaumu, and effectively arrives in Wellington with 3 times the passengers of Te Huia, because it is more integrated with everything else around it. Te Huia currently picks up people in Hamilton and a couple more in Huntly, and then gets into Auckland without adding anybody else in. So it's looked at what that may achieve as well. So more passengers, more revenue, and is reviewing the structure of the costings that KiwiRail has our operator charge us, both to operate the service but also to access the tracks, and what the options might be around reducing our costs in that space. So I'm hopeful that gives you some confidence all of that work is underway. What was the second half of your question?
Well, it was really, that covers a major part of the sensitivity analysis. So that report's going to be available in July this year?
Yes.
And so that then will be able to be consulted on next year, so that we can then get feedback from ratepayers whether they support that or not.
So in terms of public transport ticketing, you've asked us to develop a fares policy that would see public transport fares as a region being considered as part of annual plan processes annually. And within that, we would look to take forward the recommendations of council from that independent review as part of that consultation with annual plan. So that story around that was the other point you made around 51%. Based on today's numbers, we know what that impact will be, but the 51% is always total costs minus fare revenue and then split between Crown and ratepayer. So 51% is never a static number. So it's relatively hard to
It's
talk
50%, it's 51%. The 51% is static, but it's
Yes.
what it's a
What it-
percentage of
yes.
is fluid.
Yes, so it's relatively hard to give you a specific number right now. So within all public transport, those budgets that are put in place are based on an expectation of patronage and cost and government subsidy. As we've said, there's still uncertainty around exactly what the level of Crown funding will be for wider public transport at this stage.
Thank you. The other issue is relating to the capital cost, the CapEx cost going forward. And initially we were expecting a 90% contribution, which is now likely significantly reduced. I'd like to see that factored into the equation as well when we get that paper presented back to us for consultation, please.
So the rolling stock process continues. Through the development time for the long-term plan, we have engaged an external team who have been developing a detailed business case for us, and that work is now fairly close to being finished. And subject to the results of all of that work, it's recommending that the opportunity to be a separable portion on the Wellington rail stock order is the most efficient response. The decisions about that would have to be made by the agency separately, and they were very specific that their funding for the continuation of the trial isn't also a decision about rolling stock. That you would need to consider that separately as well in the context of the deposit that's identified in the budgets, I think in year 3 or year 4, but also the payment for that stock in 2030 or so.
Thank you.
Just, you mentioned with that fare increase, that proposed fare increase on 1 July, what that then takes the fare recovery percentage to. Did you say 20%?
Yes, that's what the modelling is telling us, and I've reported that to the Future Proof PT subcommittee
Right.
a couple of weeks ago.
So in terms of it making its contribution, and as Councillor Hughes was referring to, the 20% compares to, what is it on average across PT?
So
Is it
for PT nationally, the average is 11%.
11?
For
And this-
Huia, we have been asked to achieve a fare recovery ratio of 15, and the 2-year review showed that we were at 14. So
this fare increase with the proposal, alongside the proposal that you're putting forward in this paper, takes it to 20%
that's
fare
what that model
recovery.
is
So
saying. Yeah.
significantly higher than your average PT. Good to
Madam
know.
Chair, Raglan, Huntly, Tiamutu and Cambridge were up around the 40% at one stage. So, you know.
Fare
they're-
recovery.
Yes, and so that just shows how far behind perhaps the city and others are. So, you know,
That was
Yeah,
a
and
national
bringing out
figure,
national
though.
level
That's a
truth
national, that was a national figure.
I appreciate that, but and within this region, we've got some high flyers and some really low ones.
All right, Councillor Hodge.
Te Huia. My constituency is not Hamilton or beyond. So I talk with the fact that, you know, Hamilton City people use it a lot. And all of those people who probably went and put in an option are from Hamilton. And they tick the box, yes. So for that reason, I can understand being on par with the reserves from the Huia being used for them, because the people outside this area weren't targeted, rated anyway, from as far as I know. So it's, you know, pun intended, it's no skin off their nose how you decide to do this. And we don't get to have the privilege that everybody else does beyond Kirikiri upwards to use this to here, because to get from where we are to here is cost of transport to get here, whether it's electric car, their own car, the public transport or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm happy to tautoko this reserves being used because it's used by the people who use it all the time. They've used it all the time. Their rating funding has gone into a reserve for them for the future. And I think that's a great idea, as long as it does not impact on the ones outside Kirikiri. The minute that happens, then of course me as that constituent councillor outside Kirikiri will then totally go against it. So I'm happy to continue considering the reserves are targeted for those who used it prior from day dot to now, and it's all Kirikiri up the country centric to Auckland.
The chief executive has just also reminded me of a conversation that I had with the chief executive of Auckland Transport last Thursday, and just their willingness to engage with us around Te Huia going forward. So I suppose just taking that into consideration that right now, Auckland Council does not contribute. There is a willingness now to further engage in those conversations over the next 2 years, should this trial continue. So, what do I got? Councillor Marr, Councillor Smith, Councillor Nicol, and then Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note in your report that the rail services agreement needs to be extended from June till out for another couple of years. But staff note that there's no financial implications, which I struggle to understand with inflation pressures, wages, etc. like that. First off.
I need Noel and Ben, can you turn your mics off?
So Kiwi Rail have provided us with the numbers for the future years. So the budgets that we have in the system right now are based on what they believe their costs will be. So we don't see there's any additional risk is what the report was referring to.
Okay. Acknowledging that the central government haven't confirmed that 51% after the next 2 years, have they put in place, or is there indications on any targets that need to be met with the 70 and 60%? Just noticing that we had a report presented to us at Finance that shows that Te Huia is not meeting its targets.
So we have some different targets in our long-term plan from the targets that we have with NZTA.
It's lucky. Oh, there's big red boxes.
What was the other question? Sorry.
Have you had any indication on central government needing targets to be met to even indicate that they might carry on at 51% after 2 years?
Their chief executive was fairly clear in the media release that they believed that those targets needed to be met in order for them to continue the service funding, but they haven't made any commitments to continuing that. It would be subject to a 5-year review, which we need to scope up.
Performance carries on, and
so the performance that's stated within the original business case carries on at this point. The question of whether there needs to be adjustments to that based on us now getting less money from the Crown is a question, perhaps, but we believe that we were making very good progress on the targets that we already have in place. So we didn't necessarily see a need to renegotiate those. But if you wanted us to renegotiate those, we could try.
But I just, yeah, that, and not only myself, but there's a bit of frustration out there that there's two lots of targets.
Yeah, there are many sets of targets, and as we tried to make clear in the responses to the media inquiries around those, came about through a series of different circumstances where we were asked to adjust the targets, and at the same time, the councils were asking for more money from NZTA, and that was declined. So I think the statements that.
So It was that we, as I understand it, we said, okay, we'd like to support these additional services and that requires additional investment. And then that would lead to these types of targets being achievable.
Mhm.
They said, yeah, we'd like those new targets, but we're not going to give you the funding that you say is required in order to meet those.
Yes, those things all happened around the same time in mid-2022. Which, yeah, as Janine's saying, which was after the measures that you're referring to there, Councillor Marr, were set within the 2131 LTP.
Okay.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. To Huia is always going to be a vexed issue. It's been a vexed issue since it was proposed and the trial that happened some years ago and whatever. I'm just looking at the resolution on page 190, paragraph 3. It refers to as set out in the 2034 long-term plan. I don't like having to look up a decision in another document, and I would like the actual, which is reflected in paragraph 10, I believe, that 90%. I'd like all that to be brought into the resolution, which we can look at later. So that if someone was to look at our decision, they don't have to go to another document that they have to find to see what those terms are. So if it's in the resolution, it's clear.
Sorry, this is point 3 of
Point
the.
3, yeah, and renewal of rolling stock as set out in 2434 long-term plan. I want to see it spelled out in the resolution rather than looking to another document.
So through you, Madam Chair, that's just the clarification around the enhanced funding assistance rate
Yes.
associated with the rolling stock. So
Okay.
that was
Yes,
the
that's
that
it,
was the
yes.
clarification.
The reality, this is a vexed one for me. It's either way. Depends on what side of the fence I think you sit on, but yeah, I'll wait till later in the afternoon to express whether I'm in or out.
All right. Jennifer.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thanks.
Councillor Nicol.
No, important time in rail in New Zealand for that decision from Waka Kotahi. And I think they've been prudent in giving us the stretch to transition towards what could be an ongoing service. And obviously there's that consultation coming, as staff have indicated and councillors have asked for to understand what our community think about that. But yeah, I feel like it's a transitional period. It's a stretch. The response the staff have given us of a way to make that work seems very reasonable, and impressive about the fare revenue in the future, about that 20%. Thank you for sharing that, Chair Pamela. Also noting that there was some commentary in the submissions about gold card members and their some having openness to be part of the user pays. That could be looked at if necessary, and really great to hear about Auckland City Council openness for further discussion as it should be, should this go forward past the trial, ideally even before the trial, but one can hope. I think together Waka Kotai's decision and what has been put forward by staff is a really reasonable proposition to finish what was committed to several years ago in principle. Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, 3 things. So Councillor Hodge has indicated that 100% of the funding from the rates comes from Hamilton City. Now, that's not my understanding, is it?
Hamilton City and Waikato District.
Yes, so the local share contribution is by far the majority of which comes from a targeted rate on Hamilton City ratepayers. And then there is a 3% share contribution invoice to Waikato District ratepayers.
Right. And secondly, in terms of the accumulated targeted rate, which we're the reserve, if we went to 51% today, we've indicated the service wasn't affordable for ratepayers. What would have happened to that $2.2 million?
Excuse me, through Chair, just while they think about what would have happened for $2.2 million. council could have decided to continue the service either by providing additional rating money for it or at a reduced level of service. I just don't, I know that's what's stated, but that's a decision that would still have needed to be made. In terms of hypothetically that had happened, what would have happened to the $2.2 million? I'll leave it to Janine, maybe.
Does it go back into a pool, you know, what?
Oh,
yeah.
no, we've collected the money for a particular purpose. If that service or purpose is no longer occurring, then I think we would need to work out a mechanism to return that to ratepayers or potentially agree for it to be put towards other public transport services, i.e. buses, given the majority of it is collected from Hamilton ratepayers, albeit on a different basis for Te Huia versus the bus services.
So if we didn't proceed with the Te Huia proposal at the 60% for the following year and the service stopped, then the money could be reallocated back to the ratepayers.
We'd have to develop a mechanism through which to do that.
And so my submission would be we should ask them if that's what they want at the annual plan process.
Aren't we jumping ahead of the game?
Yeah.
Talking about what we're going to do in 12 months' time.
All right, I've got Councillor Strange, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Newbank. Councillor Strange?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, interesting discussion around the table. Yeah, Te Huia is always a long-term strategic transport solution. You know, so much of what was envisioned needed the full 5-year startup period. That's always what it was called. It was never a trial, I suppose. It was always a startup with the long term in mind. So it's really when the NZTA board approved the continued funding, albeit at a reduced rate, that really gave us confidence that, you know, connecting our fastest growing city with our largest city by rail, giving people options is, you know, strategically a good idea. Coming back to the decision here today, yeah, we heard from our community through the consultation, albeit some people chose not to give us feedback. Some of us also attended public meetings that really see the value in Te Huia continuing as well. Through the submissions as well, we've heard from, you know, people who want us to do more as well. It really does give me comfort that, yeah, the funding is continuing and positive talks with Auckland Transport as well. I would also like staff to also look at other ways we can fund this as well. So we know a big theme from central government is other partnerships that are perhaps out there. I know that we have had meetings ourselves with internationals who do rail very well in other parts of the world, who are keen to work with us as well. So I think what we need, though, in order to attract that investment is certainty. So having that confidence from our biggest funder, NZTA, to continue should give us confidence around our table as well that for New Zealand Inc., passenger rail, interregional passenger rail is valued. It is seen as a solution for people who don't drive or don't have, can't get any other way. So, yeah, I think we do need that certainty. We've been given a phasing in to continue with this. And yeah, we've got 2 years until that funding does reduce to get as much co-investment and as much co-partnership as we possibly can so that it is a sustainable, ongoing public transport option for everyone in our region, unlocking housing, unlocking employment, education, and health as well. The independent review as well, looking into more stops within the Auckland network. We know that Pukekohe is offline at the moment, but when that comes back on, conversations with Auckland as well. When Drury comes online as well, possible stops we could also stop at to boost our patronage and our fare box recovery as well. So yeah, we shouldn't discount those partnerships with Auckland, and we should be advocating for that alongside the possibilities of what this service could be. You know, it is a startup, it's not perfect, but so many people had the vision, this was before my time, of what it could be and what it could enable. So yeah, we just need the leadership and the vision to continue for it to actually be given a chance.
Thank you. Councillor Kneebone, did you want to make a comment? No, all good. Third bite, Councillor Smith.
Well,
Yeah.
I hadn't made up my mind, but I just listened to something. I actually think it might be a good idea to allow the reserve to be used so that if, and the cynic in me says if it gets tossed at the end of the 5-year trial, that there isn't the money to hand back. It's a lot easier mechanism because what else are we going to do?
So what we're seeing, in this recommendation is that with the increase in fare and the utilization of the reserves, that there's no immediate impact on rating should this proposal be given the tick.
Correct. So the attachment 1 to the report shows how the reserve would decline. And our view would be, based on that work, that the service could get to the end of the trial without needing to take a greater proportion from existing ratepayers.
So we've made that change. We've added a 0.4. We've removed the reference to the rolling stock in item 3. We've added 4, which is the renewal of the rolling stock is not part of this decision and would need to proceed through a new approval process to be set out via the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee.
So far as we're the ones rating and you're giving it to another body, Future Proof, to make a decision that impacts on this council. It's a joint committee, which is not, it's a non-statutory body. Thank you.
Yes?
I guess you're lucky that I'm the advisor that sits on Future Proof. Regional Council has granted Future Proof the delegation to look after the passenger transport plan as such. And it looks after the plan within its catchment. So as far as passenger transport goes, it looks after Matamata, Hamilton City, Waikato, and it might be Waipa now. The other regional transport functions that are outside of the Future Proof group are handled by Regional Transport Committee. What makes this subcommittee quite interesting is that it does report back to council in terms of the plan activities. It does not report through Future Proof. That's right. So it can recommend directly back to council as the governing body, rather than having to follow the Future Proof Joint Committee process upwards.
Right.
No.
So
They can
they
make a
can-
they are
recommendation.
recommending back to us
They
to
can
rate.
recommend
Council.
back.
All right. Yes,
Chair,
Councillor Hughes?
I would like your statement included as part of point 3. There's no impact on rates for payers, targeted rate, as a consequence of our decision during this trial period.
Just looking for confirmation that that's. Right, I've got Clyde and Ben. Can I get
just
you to fill your
clarification.
minutes? No, hang on. I'm just looking for, we're still with Councillor Hughes, but I just want to.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think in relation specifically to this matter, which is the change in subsidy rate from NZTA, the reserve has been used to offset that. I'm just conscious that there are changes that are sitting within the Chief Executive's session. Might have been my confusing maths the other day, Phil, of trying to wrap that all into here, in terms of making sure that we're taking that into position as well. Forget that. I think we have wrapped all of the changes in the draft LTP, including the CE submission and the change in NZTA funding, and have managed that through those reserve drawdowns. So it's not, I think, as shown on page 197, I think it is, not that there is no increase in rates, but there is no change in rates as a result of this decision.
I'm asking specifically for the resolution to ensure that there is no change in the rates, increase or otherwise, as a consequence of us approving the extension of this trial through June 26, is it?
Correct.
That's what I'm seeking.
So
that's part of this resolution.
So that's correct.
I've got Councillor Graff and then Ben, if you are, that's like number 4 for you. Put me in on this.
Okay, just to be clear, there's 3 main mechanisms for funding Te Huia, is that correct? Fair recovery, government funding, and a targeted rate. And then we're looking at topping up with the reserve fund, is that right?
Yes.
And in regard to the targeted rate, that is targeted 97% at Hamilton and 3% Waikato.
Correct.
Other ratepayers are not contributing at all unless they use the train.
They pay a fare.
Fair, it's the user pay. Thanks. And any decisions going forward now, is there possibly any change of model to the rating? Or is it locked in there and it has to go through consultation, et cetera, if there was a change to the model?
Any change that moves away from what you have consulted upon needs new consultation.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
2 things. Item number 4, whether that should have in it what we've got in item number 10, that this is subject to successful NZTA Crown subsidy funding at 90%. That's what we've indicated here, that it's not part of the process, but it won't proceed unless there's a 90% funding. Now that isn't in that resolution now. We should.
You want to?
Can you just remind me what year that comes in? Is it 3 or 4? Is it 4? So that will be subject to a future council's decision anyway. This council won't be able to bind a future council's decision.
So why have we suggested it here in item number 10 there, that it would only occur subject to a successful?
Sorry, that's not on, that's on a.
But the answer is because that's what we said in the LTP.
Okay. I mean, I'd like to make another amendment there that given we haven't asked the public in consultation on whether they want this funding of Te Huia to occur, that we should consult with them at the annual plan 25-26 about whether they want the rates, the rate subsidy to be used in the 25-26 year.
But could I raise a point of clarification, please, Madam Chair?
Yep.
Why do we keep jumping forward to what we're going to do
Yeah.
at the next annual plan. It's absolutely no value to the discussion today. Ben, I just don't understand why we keep doing that. We can't make that decision today.
Well, yes, we can. We've just made that with the PT one, the previous one. We've indicated that we're at the annual plan process. We're going to be coming back and making a decision there. So why is that
That
one
was,
different
but
from
we
this?
We have
consulted on
to.
that.
We
We
have
cons-
to.
We
because-
consulted on that, though.
But we've made it, we're making it, we're intending to make a decision today that cannot be fully given effect to until we go through the next stage of the process. What you're talking about here about trying to foresee what we're going to do in the annual plan 12 months' time is a different issue.
What I'm suggesting is that there's two things here. One, we're looking at a 70% subsidy, and the following year, we're looking at a 60% subsidy.
I'm not suggesting we don't have the discussion, Dan. I'm just saying we've got to have it at the right time, and we can't have it here, is how I understand it. Happy to take advice, but
If it's, is it helpful? If it's helpful, if we consulted on it next year and made a June 30 decision on what we're going to do from the 1st of July, it's very, very awkward to stop a service overnight.
And so why is that any different than the following year when you're at 51%? Because the same argument could be made there.
So through
It's
the,
just that with the 70 and the 60, we get through the last 2 years of this trial.
and the intent is
Startup,
that,
sorry, startup.
and the intent is that in parallel with the end of that 5-year period, we're consulting with the community in terms of, is it going to be assessed as successful? And if it is, would you be willing to continue to pay for that service if the NZTA funding is reduced to 51%? So that all of that can come into a final decision for the 26, 27 annual plan.
Because there's also, over the next 2 years, we might have some much more fruitful conversations with Auckland and others.
We may not. I mean, they may not. Yeah. So I mean, that's speculative to some extent. I'm just saying that the point Chris has raised is that if we consult and we have to make a decision, the same thing will apply the subsequent year. At what point does the public get to have a say on this? Is my question.
If I can just add again, it's a 5-year startup. To have made a decision at year 3 and then redecide at year 4, I think that we have confirmation of funding from the government for the next 2 years of the startup, at which point it can be reconsidered. I think it would be quite difficult to go to our public, and reconsult when there's 1 year to go to complete the startup. That's my only suggestion. It's not impossible.
And I suppose that we have confidence from NZTA to see the 2 years through. What this proposal that's before us here allows us to do is access the reserves that will allow the service to continue on this new funding regime. Okay, I do want to do yes, Councillor Hughes.
I just want point of clarification from either from our chief executive or from Phil, that I understood we were going to have to talk with Wellington Transport in terms of the future rolling stock. When is the deadline for that discussion and commitment?
So that process, Greater Wellington have already undertaken expressions of interest process, and from that they are looking at a shortlisted panel. My understanding is that they are in the process of developing their RFP procurement documents and would approach the market at this stage, noting that there is the potential for additional orders to arrive if funding is approved elsewhere. So they are including in that document the requirements that we or anybody in the Upper North Island would have around the power supply numbers and the platform heights and the length of the carriages and whatever the other technical pieces are, to allow the market to come back to Wellington with prices for what they need, and also have an understanding that there could be additional. There's no other commitment on us to the point where we make a deposit payment.
I think, Phil, the question is, at what point would our council be committed to have to make a final decision on the Wellington? Because obviously they're going to go through some type of tendering process, in which case they'll get the expressions of interest and whatever they do. And they're saying it could be X number of carriages to certain specs, or if the Huia were included, it would be Y number, an additional number with slightly different specs. At what point is that commitment? Have I got that correct?
So that commitment for us would be the point that we pay that deposit and the order then commences.
In year 4 of this LTP. Yeah. Okay. So I am gonna do the straw poll on this. So essentially we've got our wording up there. This is not including the rolling stock. This is the continuation of the startup service for the final 2 years in conjunction with the funding that has been committed from NZTA and the utilization of the reserves of targeted rates that have already been collected for the Huia service. So those who are in favor of that, please put your hand up. Sorry? No, that's included in there, that the rolling stock is not part of this decision. Yeah. This is the utilization of the reserve. Yes. So reserves being used. Sorry. Okay, we'll do the hands up. Hands up.
Sorry, Madam Chair, will the public know that we're using a I think that's important that we let them know that we've got
Yes.
those 2.2 million. Do they? Through what exercise?
So, Madam Chair, I think once we get through this process, there will be some media releases in terms of decisions that council's made, where we can clarify that. I think the decisions letter that we will provide to submitters can also include a statement to that effect.
I think it just also, and the point that was made that they already know, the public has seen this document in advance when it went out, and there's been media around it. I think that there's I can't think of any other avenue other than.
Yeah, but Chris, I appreciate that, but I still think it's important because there's the view out there that it is a cost, and that the government's going from 75 down to 70 and then to 60. I think it's important that we do allude that we've got this reserve of 2.2, which is, if we didn't have that, then it'd be a 2.2 rate rise, which is huge, just on that alone. So I think we should emphasise that we've given it, we've got to put a story around it. That's what I'm trying to say.
All right.
Just
Sorry,
briefly,
I've
Madam
done-
Chair, just a point of
Yes.
clarification before we move on. So if a council has gone out publicly in the media and stated their support for the continuation of Huia, is that predetermination?
This is a new scenario, though, considering the NZTA funding.
So you're saying, no, it's not?
I don't believe it would be.
My understanding of the media coverage after the NZTA board announcement was that the council needed to consider what the agency had decided, and then it needed to come into its deliberations today and consider what its options were. There has been media following the release of this report, and that has stated the things that are in this report only, which is that you're looking to make this decision today. So I don't believe there's in any determination in terms of how this decision gets made by you at deliberations.
All right.
No, I'm not okay with it because I've seen our councillors going out in the public making statements in support of it. It's a predetermination as far as I'm concerned.
Which statements
What
are those?
statement by
This
that?
statement for the newspaper.
Such as?
Supporting Huia, the ongoing support for Huia.
Well, this council had a position of supporting Huia.
But that was before we had this paper from knowing that NZTA
Yes,
was
and-
were changing the level of subsidy.
And I haven't personally seen any statements in the media
Oh, it was a couple of days ago.
after the NZTA decision.
I have. Angela was on television.
I've
Which one was it?
Um,
Been on a
It was
few
about
times.
2 days after the decision. After the NZTA might have been on the Friday.
On TV.
I watched Councillor Strange's interviews and listened to the online interviews, and she aligned with, as Director King has outlined, that council would need to make a decision considering the position that we now had in front of us from NZTA.
I was very clear that it is a full council decision. In everything that I said.
Spec council hadn't had a chance to make a decision on it at that stage.
I'd
They
like
just
to,
received information.
I'd like to endorse what councillor Strange has said, is that I carefully read what she said and it was clear, she'd made it clear that council had to make a decision and she wasn't preempting that.
All right. Okay, now with that, I do know that lunch is next door. So we did have a straw poll. We saw that we can have it again. So for those who support this proposal, please put your hand up. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you very much, Phil, much appreciated. All right, counselors, we are now going to adjourn for lunch. It is 12:35. If we can get back underway 1 o'clock, that would be spectacular.